Viewers, my name is Chris Wamalwa and I host Diaspora Life show. This week, we're going to be talking about what's happening around the U.S. And it's my pleasure to host a powerful team of ladies, Kenyan ladies based here in the U.S., to talk about being black in America in view of what's going on around the world. Ladies, it's my pleasure to host you today on the show. More specifically, I want to welcome Mkawasi back again. And I want to welcome Regina. And I also want to welcome Ruth. Ruth is a young, robust Kenyan living in the U.S. Who is very passionate about social issues. So, guys, it's my pleasure to host you on the show today. And just before we get into the thick of things, I'll give you just a minute a background on this. Like I said, 2 days ago, I got a message from Kenya from my young sister. And she sent me a very cryptic message. She's just telling me, can you and your family pack up and come back home? Because what's happening in America is not good for you. You still have a home back here. That really touched me because the whole week I had a very, very heavy heart. I couldn't work, I couldn't sleep because of the image that I saw of that policeman with his knees on a young black man with his pocket, with his hand in the pocket. And it broke my heart, and it really completely just messed up my whole week. So just before we talk about anything, I would like to just get a sense of how you guys, each one of you felt when you saw that picture, beginning with Regina. And please introduce yourself to our viewers before you get into how you felt. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Chris, for having me. My name is Regina Njogu. I'm an attorney based here in the Washington, D.C. area. I practice law in the U.S. Frankly, Chris and your viewers, when I saw the video, I was shocked. I was enraged. I was livid. It was gut-wrenching watching life snuffed out of a human being in plain sight on video. And honestly, the sight of it was disgusting and ghastly, so to speak.
Sister Mkawasi?
How are you, everyone? My name is Mkawasi, and I'm a playwright and director, and I also teach at Howard University in Washington, D.C. Wow, Chris, that image, I saw it soon after the case of Amy Cooper in New York, where she called the police on a black man for something he never did. And she put up this entire show, and then suddenly there is this one of a cop kneeling on a man's neck. What shocked me the most was not actually the image, because I've kind of gotten used to the callousness and insidiousness and shock of America's cruelty when it comes to racism. What really got to me was learning that the man died, and it just got too much. And I just remember that it wasn't too long before that, maybe a week or a few days before, when we were talking about Abed Avery, who was shot by the two other guys. So it was overwhelming. It was just an overwhelming week, and we're still dealing with it all.
Ruth?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ruth Kilungu, and I'm a financial analyst and as well as a podcaster. I just bring people together to talk about diaspora conversations, but it's across all African countries. So there's that. My reactions to the video, I need to say I've not been able to bring myself to watch the entire video. At a point where he's pleading for his life, I've not been able to watch past that. I've watched clips of it. It's just so hard to watch someone plead for his life, and the person who is killing him has no regard to the please, you know. And it's been hard. I've been following some social media activists, and so I'm coming from Mahmoud and Breonna in Kentucky, Amy Cooper in New York, and then to get to Minnesota and hear George Floyd just pleading for his life, and this police officer really not even caring. It's been hard to watch. Even right now, I just get teared up just talking about it. So it's just been hard. It's been, I'm still processing, honestly.
So Mkawasi, you've been dealing with the issues of social justice for a long time. What then does it mean to be a Black person in America?
Wow, where do we start with that? Okay, it's first of all, we can look at it at the level of its immediate meaning. When we talk about being Black, we are talking about America's caste system. So if you're an outsider and you come to the American community for the first time, you learn that there is a very well established and legal caste system that has layers of races, and usually you will have to find your place on that hierarchy. You've got the white race. There's actually legally there's several categories: white or Caucasian, Pacific Islanders, Black or African American, Hispanic or other, and you're supposed to find your own place. You check your box. Mm-hmm. And it's funny that this caste system has been a part of American life for so long that the shocking thing is that it's normal. It's actually normal. You know, when we talk about caste systems like the Hindu system where they had the untouchables, they shock us, they disgust us. Yet here you have the civilization of the world, so-called civilization of democracy, leading democracy in the world, and it stands on this caste system. And on that caste system, the bottom rank are Black people. So that is what it means to be Black in America. It means you're at the bottom of the totem pole. And it's not just a social totem pole, it's socioeconomic. And it's also politically disempowered. Now, on that layer of Black, there's another thin layer right at the very bottom, and that is African Black. And when you come from Africa to the US, that is where you belong. So usually you see that, and a lot of us either decide to check other because we refuse to identify with that low rank, or we decide to figure out, you know, what is my place really, or decide we're not going to check that box. Either way, you're forced to, when you're looking for a job, when you're signing up for college, when you're doing a whole lot of things, that question comes in and you're supposed to check it. That is what it means to be Black. It means to be at the bottom of the social, economic, and political totem pole.
Regina, you spend most of your life in the U.S., defending immigrants, especially in the U.S., but you have a great understanding of there's racial injustice in the judicial system in America. Right now, one of the issues that people have a hard time dealing with is, so the cop who killed George Floyd he's going to be arraigned, yes. But most Africans, especially minority groups, are very skeptical about the outcome of the case. Could you speak to the racial injustice in America in the judicial system?
Yes, Chris, there's definitely institutional racism in the criminal justice system in this country. And that starts with the policing, to jails and courts. Studies show, which is really a reality, that African Americans are more likely to go to jail for the same charges as opposed to white Americans. it also shows that Black Americans are more likely to get arrested for certain offenses as opposed to white Americans. So that's institutional racism. It's entrenched in the system, and it's institutional, and it's continuing, and that's a big problem. Now, when we look at policing, there is disparities in policing in white neighborhoods and Black neighborhoods. And when you look at even the jail system, if you look at the jail system in the United States, there are more Black, actually male Blacks incarcerated in the jails than white Americans. And also, when you look at incarceration, for instance, for drug offenses, Blacks are more likely to get incarcerated for drug offenses than white Americans. And also, when you look at the judiciary, there's disparities in sentencing, such that when you go before a court of law for the same offenses, Black people are more likely to attract a higher sentence than white people. So that's a big problem in the US. And the way I look at it is that we've had 150 years since slavery was abolished in the United States. We've had about 56 years since the Civil Rights Act. We've had about 29 years since Rodney King. And these have been opportunities that have been missed to institute changes in the system. There have been calls for changes, but what I see is that most of the times when these things happen, like George Floyd, like we had Eric Garner, we had Amadou Diallo in New York. When these things happen, what people call for is a conversation around race relations. But we need to move beyond the conversation. We really need to move to meaningful reforms.
So, Ruth, as a young Kenyan, I know you're born and raised in Kenya, but you spent quite a number of years in the US. So this is your country. It's part of your system. Now you're going to inherit this system. How are young Africans, and more specifically Kenyans, feeling about what's going on right now?
I mean, there is a real sense of alarm. This is where we are. This is what we have to deal with every single day. And I people know these are the things that people get to see when videos come out of, for the most part, this happens and people move on. There's been so many protests even before that we've not seen real reform. So there's a sense of alarm. I don't know whether you've seen, actually there are some young Kenyans out in the streets protesting. And that's encouraging. But I think we need to do way more than that. There is protesting going on the streets and say, we do not like what's happening, but the real reform happens when we change the guard. The people who are guarding the system, they need to be changed. And that can only happen if we get involved in the political process as well.
First of all, there's some subtle tension between Africans in America, continental Africans, and then African Americans. There's always been this discussion about different experiences. Speaks to the fact that what's happening in America affects continental Africans living in America at this time in the history of the world.
Well, for one, I think the rancor between Africans, continental Africans, and African Americans is created by two main things: dignity and resources. When you have Africans come into the US, these are majority Africans who are well educated, and they quickly either get into the workforce or get an education and rise up the ladder. And they are also Africans who are able to become homeowners much faster. And they are Africans who, when they begin to have children and raise their families, these children go to private schools. You hear a lot of our Kenyan friends saying, oh, I'm taking my kids to Montessori. Oh, I'm looking for this county. I'm moving to this county where there are better schools. These are people who can afford to say that. You see the Nigerian population that has a huge organization of medical professions. In Baltimore City, I think every other pharmacy is managed by a Nigerian. So you have this African population that lives in the United States, and in the eyes of the African American community that has been struggling for centuries, it looks as if this population came in and they're doing better than them. So there's an aspect of resources where the African American community sees it's almost there's an unfairness that you have these Africans coming in, and the system tends to favor them. Because once you have a system that is hierarchied, economically hierarchied, that system favors those at the top and disfavors those at the bottom. Now, socially, when it comes to dignity, Africans are at the bottom, at the very bottom, because you come in with a sense of, you guys are in that, I came from that dark continent. You guys must be those primitive people. You must be one of the very few who managed to get onto a plane and come to this country. So whatever we see of Africans here is not typical. It's probably just a very few percentage. So either way, as long as you're an African, socially, your dignity is so much lower that as an African, you either hide away or you try to do everything you can to improve that space of your dignity so that you are seen as a person who's worthy of more respect. And it's funny how we do these things, how a lot of Africans do these things. You either try to stay away from the people who are lower on that totem pole of the American caste system, or you try to get closer to the people at the top. These are very interesting dynamics that we do to improve our status of dignity.
Ruth, my 21-year-old young man was in the streets of Wilmington yesterday in a vest, demonstrating along the many thousands of African Americans and also these Africans in the streets, and of course white Americans in the streets about the issue, and he's very passionate about this issue. I felt very, very nice because, in a sense, you know, this is a war that is going to take generations. So this is your generation now to take on where Mkawasi, Regina, and me are living. How hopeful are you that you guys will bring about the kind of changes that we've been advocating for, beginning with Martin Luther King?
So, as I answer your question, let me jump on what Kawasi and Regina said. We're not different from African Americans. As Nkawasi said, when we step outside, there's no neon light, like differentiating us. So if the police actually, let me give you a very good story. When my brother came here, brother was born and bred in Kenya, but then he moved here. It was, I think, the first week, and we lived in a very quiet neighborhood, but several blocks down the street, there was a gas station and we needed milk. So he said, I'm going to walk down the street. I'm going to go, and get milk. And I said, okay, he wanted to explore his new place where he just moved to. And he went to the gas station and he stayed quite a bit. And I started getting concerned. But, he came back and he told me, they called the police on me. This was a week he had been in the US. And the reason why they called the police on him is because he went inside the gas station with his hood on. And we're not even aware of these things when we move here. And so we come and start interacting with a system that's geared against us. And as we settle here and have kids here, and, as I said, as you said, I was bred in Kenya, but when I moved here, I had to learn this system. For me to survive in it, I have to learn it. But young people, we need to get involved, but we need our parents to step up too, because I think our parents have put their head in the sand for way too long. They don't participate as well in the political process. They, move us away from African Americans. A ton of people don't have friends who are African Americans, actually. That I can say for sure. And the segregation we actually end up having harms us. Because we end up thinking that we are better than them, or we don't need them, we can survive the system without them. Well, we are benefiting from their hard work. We're here because of what they've done. We've been able to go to school and do this many things because they've done the hard work to make the system, I'm not gonna call it equal, but better. And I think it's for us as young people to get more involved, get to know who our political leaders are. Do they support us? And if they don't, let us exercise the power of the ballot. If you are a citizen here, there's no reason why you should not be voting. And not only the general election, I know people really love that one, but we need to start getting to know our mayors, our police departments, our DAs. That's where we need to put our energies in. So for young people, I think it's high time we, number one, started standing together as one, as Black people in America. It doesn't matter what origin they come from, whether they're African Americans, Africans, from the Caribbean, it doesn't matter. We need to stand together as one and start exercising our power in the ballot box.
So, Mkawasi, looking at what is happening in America right now, because practically every major city in America has been affected by this. There's a sense of something different about what's going on right now. As a teacher, what do you think is different right now, and what does that speak to the whole issue around the fight for racial equality in America?
Well, I'm hoping that this is really the tipping point, because I do remember during the Eric Garner case, the tension rose across the country. And so I would say it's been a cycle. I think what really has to be addressed would go back to what Regina was saying at the very beginning, that we have to go beyond where we get to. The conversations, the endless conversations, the tension, rising to the tension, the riots, the shouting, the Black Lives Matter, all that has got to go beyond there. And beyond there means breaking the system. So the system that's in place has to be broken. Now, is it possible that we are there? Analysts will say yes. They will say that there is a place where America has gotten to right now that can go two ways. It can go either the way of a race war, which white nationalists or white supremacists, same thing, have been trying to court, or it can go the way of reform. Now, America got to this place before in 1861, when tensions rose to such a high point that they decided there was no way they were going to rectify things except completely break the system. And that led to 600,000 deaths. Americans decided to kill each other, go to war against each other in order to break and remend the system. And that is what led to the abolition of slavery and led to the United States becoming the United States that we know about. Now, have we reached that place right now, once again, where the system of racism needs to be completely broken? And that means getting rid of the caste system as we know it, getting rid of constructs of white and constructs of Black, getting rid of privileges, getting rid of laws and policies that disadvantage minorities. Have we reached that point? Time will tell.
So, Ruth,
Yes.
This is the kind of world that you're coming to inherit. Are you hopeful?
Am I hopeful? To be honest, I don't know. That's me being very honest. So I feel that I can be hopeful is if we become involved in the system. I think that I'm more hopeful about. I've seen a lot of Africans caring about what's happening and wanting to do something to change things.
So, Regina, as we wind up, the charges have been brought on the key killer, but many people are still skeptical that he's likely to go scot-free.
I have never been a prosecutor, but I think when a prosecutor brings charges against an accused person, they always bring charges that they're likely to secure a conviction or they're likely to prove. Now, in this case, they brought charges of third-degree murder and manslaughter. I think, in my opinion, those are the appropriate charges at this point, because those are easy to prove. When you look at third-degree murder, all the prosecutor needs to prove is that he had a depraved heart. It's called depraved heart murder. It means there was such depravity in his action that it was so out of bounds that it's egregious. And that's easy to prove. It does not require the element of intent or premeditation. Now, when you look at manslaughter, it requires reckless disregard for human life, which is also easy to prove. Now, most people are calling for charges to be brought in the first degree murder, but that's going to be difficult to prove because there has to be intent and premeditation. But in this case, some have argued that during the 2 minutes and 53 seconds when Mr. Floyd was unresponsive and the knee of Mr. Derek Chavnik, I believe that's the name of the policeman, was still on his neck, that during that 2 minutes and 53 seconds, he could have formed the intent or had the premeditation to commit the murder. Because when we talk about intent or premeditation, it doesn't matter how long that was formed. It doesn't have to be a prolonged period of time for that to be formed. It could have been even 2 minutes or even 1 minute and still would go towards proving intent. However, at this point with what I think, this is just my opinion, the charges that they've brought, they are more likely, and there's a very high likelihood that they're going to secure a conviction. About first degree murder, I'm just not sure.
Viewers, I've been talking to Regina Njog, who is a lawyer based here in the US. She specializes in family law. And I've been talking also to Mkawasi Mcharo Hall, who teaches at Howard University. And of course, Ruth Kilungu, who is a Kenyan based here in the US. She was born in Kenya, but now she's making her life here in the US. And we've been discussing being black in America. It's been very interesting. And this is just the first part of the discussions. We're going to keep coming back to this topic because these are now the current issues, and these are very, very issues that are really affecting Kenyans and generally, black people from around the world. I hope to see you again next week as we bring you more stories from the diaspora. My name is Chris Omalo, and I want to thank my participants today for joining me in our show today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.